Day 7 of the America's Cup Finals, and we have 2 races scheduled beginning at 1:15. But if you've just come in the last half hour or so, or even earlier this morning, you'll notice it's quite windy out. So, Ian, I think that's going to be the story today. Let us know what's going on.
For a long time, we've known that the tides were going to be. This is our toughest tide day. The strong ebb starts out at 2.9 and then 2.7, so it's a low wind limit. And of course, just to complement the day, we've probably got our strongest winds forecast. So whether we can marry those two things together remains to be seen. So the committee boat's on its way out to the race course shortly, and we'll get it out there on station and see what we've got. So fingers crossed, but we'll see. We thought it'd be tough the other day, and we got 2 races in, so we'll wait and see.
Okay, thank you. And with the scoreline 7-1 for Emirates Team New Zealand today, of course, the first day where there's a possibility of the America's Cup being won. Stephen, the weekend, it just outstanding on all standpoints, from the crowds down here to the action on the water. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Absolutely. I mean, I don't need to tell anybody in this room. We had a fantastic weekend. We didn't quite get to, but almost got to 100,000 people over both days. We had, I think, about 1,400 boats were out on the bay. Great weather, great racing. The superlatives just keep coming for what we saw especially on Sunday. Absolutely fantastic.
Okay. All right, thank you. Any questions for Luca? Get us started.
Ian, could you please be more specific than that, the last numbers that you got from up there? Wind. You know it.
The wind numbers?
Yeah.
Look, the forecast, is around 25 knots. We may be gusts higher today. And what we're seeing out on the race course, 10 minutes ago we were seeing 16 knots at Anita Rock, which is, right in close to just west of St Francis Yacht Club, and up to 24 knots down on Treasure Island. So, we're right in the middle of that, and the measurements are taken on regardless in the gill sensor 10 metres in the air at the southern end of the start entry mark, and that's its position, and we'll be on station shortly, and that's what determines the wind limit.
Stuart?
Ian, Stuart Alexander. As early panic is setting in over return flights, I just wondered, one of your colleagues said today that the agreement is a very rare thing in this event, and you spoke earlier about any changes at all in wind limits. My understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, I'm sure you will, is that the Coast Guard isn't really too worried. They think that you're in charge of the event and that the safety is your problem. Are there even any talks at all with the teams about changing the wind limits if this situation continues?
Well, let me clarify. The Coast Guard. Stephen and I went to a meeting with the Coast Guard before the event started, and the Coast Guard raised wind limits with us. They're very clear, and they've watched us operate over a long period of time here now, and they're smart guys. Captain Matt Bliven is he's a naval architect from MIT. There's no pulling the wool over his eyes, and they're very aware that wind is a very controlling factor in the performance and sailability of these boats. So to say I don't think the Coast Guard is that worried about it, because it's inside the special regulated local area and it's my responsibility, is probably a little bit of an understatement, to say the least. And any changes to any of the safety requirements require me to go and talk to Greg Stump, the commander of the area, and their legal counsel, and their committee, which is probably about 5 people. And I would have to have, I think, a compelling story why they would accept any changes. To to answer your other question, I haven't been in any discussion about changing the wind limits. I've heard rumour that there may have been some discussion between the teams, but it hasn't come to me.
Ian, question over here. What is the forecast for the wind and the tide for the next couple days?
The tide is, we're progressing through the ebb tides and heading back towards the floods. The wind forecast for tomorrow is quite a lot lighter and lighter in the rest of the week. So, if we miss a race or 2 races today, we will be looking to roll straight through on Wednesday, Thursday, Friday if necessary.
Matt?
Ian, a couple of things. One, what are you going to do anything differently with the boats today as far as the dock out show? Are they going to stay here longer before they go out? Or that's one question. The other one I've forgotten. I'll remember in a minute.
So, as I said, regardless is going to the area where she measures the wind. She'll be there probably around 11:15. The boats come here at 11. So I will review where we're at say 11:30 before the boats leave the dock and the dock out show happens. If the wind limit the wind limit, and it's very simple, a big box pops up in the middle of the computer screen that doesn't let you do anything until you go OK. If that's well and truly lit up on the 3 computer screens on the committee boat, I'll hold the boats here ashore, I think, to be prudent until and we will leave regardless out on the race course for a period of time, and we'll just watch the trend of the wind and how it's going.
Okay, I've just remembered the other question. That was if with these reserve days coming up, can the teams request of you that they don't sail and turn a reserve day into a lay day for maintenance purposes and the rest of it?
Once again, that would be a mutually agreed thing. We saw that on Monday, but today we're 2 races behind already, and if we lose today, we could be up to 4 races behind. It's making it pretty hard for Stuart to get back on aeroplanes and change his booking. So, we are running out of runway with, potentially still quite a number of races to be run.
Ian, over here. You were talking about needing a compelling story to up the wind limit. Could you talk about the compelling story about how the crews have improved their performance on the boat and how much better they are sailing these boats than when they started? They've made some pretty aggressive moves that seemed a bit surprising given all the talk of how dangerous the boats have been.
Well, it's amazing how it's moved. I know when I came out with the wind limits at the end of May, June, and there wasn't consensus across the board that they were right. A lot of consensus that they were too high. A lot of thought that they were too high. There was also a lot of thought that as the racing got more intense, the wind limit should actually go lower as they wanted to pull off the death-defying acts. And, my progression from 20 to 21 to 23 knots through July, August and September was, there was no logic to what I'd done. And I had that conversation with a number of the teams. Now we sit here today, the logic appears to be reasonably sound. And, and maybe it has been a little bit. We've saw it in the Red Bull. The kids came on, they trained, they got great in the boats, and they sailed the boats better than we ever imagined. Up until a week ago, I guess the competition of, the pressure of 2 boats racing wasn't there, and really until the last few days, and we've seen this not only incredible change in performance of the yachts. Oracle, where did Oracle find 4 knots overnight going upwind? but it's there in the crew performance as well. And of course, you know, if we were going for another few weeks and we were going into October, you know, maybe the wind limit should be 26 knots. I don't know. But the decisions were made quite some time ago, and you know, we were looking into the crystal ball, and you know, they were the rules of engagement for the competition that everyone agreed. The rules that weren't agreed were hard fought, as you all know, but these were agreed, you know, by all the teams at that time.
Ian, taking in the elemental forces there, what were those numbers again, please? This is wind against the tide, and so the limits for race 11 is?
Is 20.1 knots.
20.1, and race 12 is?
20.7.
20.7, thank you.
0.3, sorry.
0.3?
Yeah.
So that's 20.1 and 20.3. Thank you.
Correct. When you look at the current map, it's just a large amount of black arrows pointed towards the bridge.
Yeah. It's 2.9 and 2.7 are the current numbers.
This is the strongest current day we have in the whole summer. Yeah, this is getting up towards the day that Oracle had the difficulty last October.
Ian, forgive my poor understanding, but I just want to be sure, if they don't sail today, tomorrow is 100% no race, or there's still room for an agreement for changing that between now and tomorrow morning?
No, I think we're 100% racing tomorrow.
Okay, any other questions? So the last thing I'll say before we get into the racing, if we do get 2 races in today, should Emirates Team New Zealand win both races, obviously the post-race program changes fairly dramatically. There'll be a public prize-giving ceremony down at the presentation stage, and following that there'll be press conferences with each of the teams, and that applies every day that we are potentially on a race-winning day. Isabel, did you have something? No?
Yes, that we will have a meeting for photographers to explain the positions for the prize giving at 11:15 here in the press conference room. Thank you.